Our country's been through a heck of a lot. Well, the world has been through a heck of a lot over the entire year. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. It's also important to acknowledge how we've all stuck together, and I mean all, from every part of this world. We have come to each other's aid and to each other's side. And I think that's really important for us to remember. And it has a lot to do with what I'm going to be speaking about this morning. I think one of the most important lines in that reading that Nathan shared with us was that the way we experience the earth changes depends on our perception. And the truth is, the way we see anything depends on our own perception. Radical forgiveness, as the author explains it, is a shift in perception that allows you to understand that in truth, and I'm talking truth with a capital T, looked at from the perspective of the spiritual big picture, that nothing wrong has ever happened. Now, as I said earlier, it's a very radical point of view, and I think it really needs to be looked at and really understood. Because if we truly do believe that it's all God, that it's all good, and that God and life are perfect in every way, and we believe that God is in charge and all is well, then we know that everything has a divine purpose. We can't pick and choose what that means, right? This is a divine purpose and this isn't. It either is or it isn't. That's the truth, even when we don't have a view of that bigger picture. But we can still know that there is a divine purpose. And with all the events that have recently been happening on our planet, I know that is a tough one to swallow. I get that. Radical forgiveness, however, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to our rational mind. And that's because our rational mind is grounded in our everyday reality, utilizing only our five senses. And radical forgiveness that he teaches and talks about operates according to a spiritual law, a metaphysical idea. So in this book, he shares some really incredible examples that show this concept. And the one that I really resonated with was the one about the Dalai Lama. And he asked this question: what if, and sit with this for a moment, just work with me here, what if the Chinese government had to invade Tibet so the Dalai Lama would be forced to travel the world and spread his beautiful, incredible message beyond the borders of his own country? Now, isn't that an amazing thought? Now, at the time he was pushed out, there weren't a lot of happy people about it. Those who loved him were devastated. And yet, look at the gift that unfolded through that. His teachings have literally spread the world. And they have opened the door for so many people to transform their lives through his ideas, through his teachings. You see, we don't ever truly know the bigger picture until we move beyond that event, until we move beyond that experience, that challenge. In The Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes wrote this: forgiveness acknowledges that each person is on a path of growth and evolution, and that each experience can be used for wholeness. Wherever there is pain and anguish, there is something that can be learned to bring about harmony and greater wisdom. Forgiveness is the choice to see people as expressions of God. And that doesn't mean just people in this room. That doesn't mean just people in your family that you love and care deeply about. That means all human beings. And that takes courage. So what can bring about that radical shift in our perception? Especially in situations where we feel victimized, where we feel hurt. How do we do that? Well, actually, it only requires a willingness to accept the possibility that life is not simply a series of random events. It is, in fact, the unfoldment of a divine plan. One that unfolds for us exactly how it needs to unfold in our life for our healing, for our growth, whether that means on a personal level or on a humanitarian level. In other words, every event, however pleasant, however unpleasant, has been called forth by that higher power that knows exactly what is needed for healing. And as we begin to live from that perspective, rather than the perspective of a victim, everything in our life begins to flow a little more easily. And we get to that place through forgiveness. The lack of forgiveness is nothing more than stuck energy. And that energy gets stuck in us, and it's caused by past judgments, by resentments, by anger, by criticism, by blame, by all those things that we don't like, right? But we do hold on to them. And the way forward and through that is to use our spiritual tools that we have, because they help us release that stuck energy. Helps raise our vibration, helps raise our awareness and become the loving, compassionate, forgiving beings that we have the potential to be. Because we each and all do have that potential. The purpose of practicing forgiveness is so we develop that state of peace and well-being in our life. And who doesn't want that? By moving through that process of forgiveness, you provide a platform for healing, for growth, for learning. And what does that result in? Healthy, nurturing relationships. Not just with others, with yourself as well. Forgiveness is that emotional and spiritual gift that will provide us that freedom from suffering. That freedom from holding on to all that stuff that's old and not of any use to you anymore. Those things that no longer serve us that we want to get rid of. We don't have to be angry anymore. We don't have to blame. We don't have to resent. We don't have to hate. All those things are so unnecessary. We want to open our heart. We want to be vulnerable. And we don't always want to. However, that's how we love and live that peaceful life. Forgiveness is that way to change a painful state of mind into a peaceful one, because we begin accepting situations without judgment, knowing that there is a higher purpose. And that knowing that whatever's going on is for our best and our highest. That's not always easy to see. It's not always easy to accept. Author Catherine Ponder said this: when you hold resentment toward another, you are bound to that person or condition by an emotional link that is stronger than steel. Forgiveness is the only way to dissolve that link and get free. And I'm sure we've all had an experience in our life at one point or another where we felt that way, when we just feel really tight inside because we are so linked to that event, circumstance, story. And it behooves us to forgive others, to forgive ourselves. That's just as important. When we resist forgiving others, it's generally because our ego is so attached to our own judgments about how they are wrong and how we are right. And when we create and live in that duality, the good, bad, the right, and the wrong, it is not a peaceful choice to live our life. It keeps us stuck. It keeps us stuck in that painful pattern of behavior. And the same thing is true when we don't forgive ourselves. Whether it's something we've said, whether it's something we've done, whether, maybe we hurt someone unintentionally or even intentionally, we need to forgive ourselves for those things. We don't want to hang on to that either. When we choose to forgive, we free ourselves from being stuck in that same old place. We can apply our God-given everyday courage to consciously choose a different way of being. And it is a conscious choice. And then when we do that, we're no longer attached to that past, what has happened before, those old experiences, whatever we're attaching our anger, frustration, resentment, blame to, we can let go of all of that. And then when we do that, we let go of all those ill feelings or that suffering that we've been holding on to. And you know what happens then? Our heart can open, and our heart opens to grace. And forgiveness always opens that space in our heart. The famous Indian mystic and enlightened master Osho said this: "The heart is always right if there's a question of choosing between the mind and the heart, because mind is a creation of society. It has been educated. You've been given it by the society, not by existence. The heart is unpolluted." And don't you know that how true that is? When you are in that real quiet space and you're connecting with the divine, you're connecting with your source, don't you just feel all that love? That's your unpolluted heart. And it's a beautiful space to be in. So Tipping suggests in this book to change our perception. What we can do is what he refers to as the radical forgiveness reframe. Now, for those of you who know about the Enneagram, it's perfect for me because as a 7, I reframe everything to be pretty and perfect. So this reframe is awesome for me. So this is where we replace our story, whatever that looks like, with another story, a radical forgiveness story. So this story says that what appeared to have happened is far from being a tragedy, and it was in fact what we wanted or needed to experience, and was in that sense absolutely perfect. Now, that's not always easy to look at situations like that. It can be a very challenging idea to accept. However, looking at it this way does not require us to see why that situation was or circumstance was perfect. And we don't have to immediately understand what the lesson is that we're to learn from it. And that's a good thing, because usually it's beyond our ability to comprehend why at that particular moment anyway. With the way he talks about this reframe is all you need is that willingness to be open and to look at it. Be willing to look at the idea that there's a gift in it somewhere, and then choose peace. When we get used to thinking that way, life becomes much more peaceful. I am not saying close your heart to tragedies. Open your heart. Be compassionate. Pray. Send love. Send energy. Send whatever healing light you want. We don't ever want to close our eyes to others' suffering, and that's not what this is about. What I am saying, though, is it's freeing to stop resisting and to stop judging what's happening and simply surrender to what is naturally occurring. Because we can't change it anyway. Nothing challenges our willingness to entertain the possibility that there's divine perfection in absolutely everything than when we watch the news or hear about a whole string of terrible things that are occurring. That absolutely does challenge the way we see things. Because our perception of spiritual reality is so limited, we cannot fathom how it can be purposeful in any spiritual sense. That's our humanness. And that's normal. It's beyond our comprehension, given our level of conscious awareness at this particular time. And if we can't understand it, then we're going to find ourselves really rejecting this idea. So I say move into this idea slowly. Because in order to help us work through this dilemma, you can remember this. Experience in your own life will show you that when something traumatic happens, something unwanted happens, by the end of that, there has been a change in your life which is always for the better. Now, it may take a week, it may take a month, and it may take 10 years. And it always happens. Always. So if that works at the level of our own experience, it must also be working exactly the same way when it comes to world events. I believe that. The idea of radical forgiveness is not selective. It either works for everything or it works for nothing. There's no in between. And that's true for all spiritual laws. We'll feel more peaceful as we use our spiritual tools because they will help us open to the possibility and stay in that mindset that everything absolutely does happen for a reason. Even if we use those tools in that make it or fake it till you make it, it helps. We need those spiritual tools to help us through these challenging times, to see things more clearly, since for the most part, our consciousness is too limited to see that bigger picture, to understand that what is going on is for our greater good. We'll understand eventually why. Just not right now, not today, maybe not even tomorrow. But know that God is in charge, that all is well. Everything is in divine order, even though you don't see it, even though you don't feel it maybe right now. It is the truth. It is always the truth. Use your tools, meditation, contemplation, prayer, energy healing, whatever tools you use them. Have compassion for what's happening in the world, without question. Continue to send that love, light, and that healing energy everywhere you can, because we need it. As we do that, not only does it raise our personal vibration, it does raise that vibration of this planet as well. That resistance and judgment, those things will not help on a personal or a planetary level create a peaceful, loving life. Work on surrendering to that idea that Spirit knows exactly what it's doing, because it is the absolute truth. And remember, only love has the ability to transform our life and the way that we experience it. Thank you so much for being here while I shared this truth as I understand it.